Philosophers talk to our times. Here's a question for you on a dark morning in France. What is the most important, to the structure of the political world, political scandal you've never heard of? Well, if you've never heard of it, how can you know it? All right, I'll give up playing. I'm thinking of the exclusion crisis. For those of you who don't know, which might be most of you, it's a crisis that arguably started in 1671 and certainly lasted until 1688. It was a crisis that imperiled the Stuart monarchy in Britain. It was a crisis that really came from the fact that the heir to the throne, the brother of the king, was a Catholic. And in 1671 or 2, he had refused to take the Test Act, which meant that in order to hold office in the British government, you had to renounce the Pope and all the rest of it. The crisis, though, didn't really get going until 1679, when there was a concerted effort that lasted for 3 years to exclude James from the throne. It fails. James comes to the throne in 1685 and rules for 3 years, before eventually he is replaced by William of Orange anyway. It was a major political crisis, but why is it so important to you? 2 reasons. First of all, the exclusion crisis is, of course, where the original political parties come from. That idea deep in democracy that we are in a two-party state and no more, at least within the Anglo-Saxon world. And you must have a voting system that encourages only 2 parties. Comes from the exclusion crisis. Yes, that means that idea is older than democracy itself. Democracy was created in order to enable the 2-party system, and not the other way round. And that's always worth remembering if you're thinking, why does the system last so long? But that's only half the picture. The other reason that the exclusion crisis really matters to you is because the notion of the British Empire and British government and all things Anglo-Saxon was accidentally defined within the exclusion crisis in the context of an exclusion tract called 2 Essays of Government, written by John Locke. Now, first of all, I ought to confess something to you all. Just as a philosopher, John Locke has always defeated me. I have always found his ideas, he is the original empiricist, the idea that humans are born as a blank canvas, a tabula rasa, on which their experiences are written, through which experiences they learn about the world and become who they are. Now, I have always found that idea immensely trivial. I know, must be made wrong. And not worthy of proper consideration because it falls down on the issues of time and space straight away. And also perception, and. And if I wanted to have empiricism, I could find it in the works of Spinoza, if I really must. He certainly has a lot of empiricism, and I much prefer it in Hume, who considers the ontological necessities of it. And blah, 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 blah. But I am also aware that the fault must be mine, because two of the philosophers I regard most, Whitehead and Leibniz, think that Locke is absolutely wonderful, and in their own different ways get thoroughly inspired by him. So I confess, I'm missing something about Locke. There's something I don't understand. And I say that to you, because you might say, well, you just don't understand the argument. Because it will become very clear to you, I loathe the argument that I do understand. Locke presents, then, a bewitching version of what the state of nature would have been like. Humans before government. And basically, they're Englishmen without trousers. So fundamentally, they are like Robinson Crusoe. They look upon the world and its virgin forest. They clear the forest. They farm the land. They gain possessions. They're living in a world of plenty. There is no scarcity. It's abundance. There's no reason for war. All is right in this veritable Garden of Eden. And then the serpent enters in. Strangers come, take their property. They expand, they meet their neighbors. They start to fight over land. And so the state of peace goes to a state of war. And beyond the war, the only way you can find redemption is to form a state. A state that defines the rights of property, that enshrines then what humans can do and what can't do. But it is limited. It is limited only to do those things that defend the free citizen. It has no other rights beyond that. This is then kind of the American Constitution. The right to bear arms is enshrined in the Constitution, in inverted commas, and older than the state itself. Because the state of war, and beyond that the state of peace that came before it, are older than the state itself. Locke then presents arguments about why it's all right to have slavery. I have to say that because I don't like him. And arguments about what property is. Property is your ability to use a thing. That are very bourgeois, I suppose I would say. Remember, he's writing at a time of aristocracy. And what he's actually saying is that true property, the true rights of property, come through use alone and their use value. And your ability to use what you have. All right, you could say, why do I loathe this argument so much? Because this is an argument of codified, glorified callousness. You see, if you are not an Englishman and thinking like an Englishman in terms of profit or loss, what are you? Are you one of those foreigners we have to exclude so that we can have our state, we can have our property? We exist in a state of war against you. And what is more, of course, those foreigners could be found anywhere, particularly in their own lands. This is the argument, then, that justifies empire. What is empire but just the Englishman going forward into the barbaric wastes where people do not wear trousers and they do not know the value of commercial property and follow other gods. And therefore they can be excluded. You may have your properties in these wide lands, and when those that lived there before come against you, you know what to do. You are in a state of war against them. It is then the argument that justifies the English-British Empire. Remember, Locke is writing, he's a member of the Whig Party. I should have said that. He's the man of business of the Earl of Shaftesbury. And so we're very important within one side of the exclusion crisis. He basically is for excluding James and against then simple monarchies that have property by God-given right. What he's trying to explain is how the state is formed by an accord. And if the monarch breaks the accord, then all could follow. But he is also writing at a time when the East India and West India companies are being founded, when Britain is trading slaves and beginning to grow its empire. Britain has already arrived in India. It's always a big commercial presence in North America. And he is justifying that. Because true native-born folk always think like Englishmen. And if they don't, they are somehow foreign, difficult and dangerous, to be excluded. More than that, Locke becomes then the ultimate argument of all those who want to justify others' bad behaviour. Faced with victims, they blame the victim. They say, why didn't they run away? Why not? Why didn't they act to stop it? It gives you then, why not indeed? Well, usually it is because most victims are held in the grip of very powerful people who have terrified them and don't have the opportunity to run away. In the Locke world, in the world of nature, if you are poor, it is your fault. You haven't worked hard enough or you're not thinking like an Englishman. In the real world, of course, it is so much more complicated. And yet, there is something very relaxing about the sheer callousness of blame of the Locke world. You can forget all those difficult things of Hobbesianism, all those difficult points where within the Hobbes version of this, the state actually founds the human mind, so the two are not independent from each other. You will know Rousseau also uses the same argument. And therefore, it is always the state's responsibility, if people are at war, that is something that is deep within the state and how it has created their minds. Within the Locke, that's all poppycock. Just ignore it. If they're bad, it's their fault. If it's poor, it's their fault. If they're a victim, it's their fault. If we colonize them, it's their fault. If they're slaves, it's their fault. It's the beats of callousness that create our society again and again and again, because it opens up the possibility that the measures of all humanity, the Peon of all souls, is the Englishman abroad and at home. Think like them, the argument goes, and everything will be right. And if it isn't right, we'll have a stake to bash up anybody who makes it wrong. And anybody else who thinks differently, they're just a savage and can be dismissed. Isn't this the argument of our times? The argument that pulls societies apart, that creates pogroms against immigrants, the argument of fear that we keep our own, that creates a callousness of mind that eats into our souls at the last. God, I hate Locke.